Hi, we're down to the last section in the last 4 chapters. So on to chapter 26, Bruises Behind the Eyes. Tony stood outside the closed door of Jody's bedroom waiting for Audra to bring a sleeping pill. They'd been able to get Jody back to bed after a lot of convincing that her girls would be fine. But as Tony stood waiting, she could still hear her family's rapid debating coming from the living room, reminding her of a murder of chattering crows. Doug, see what I've had to put up with? Bridget, I'm telling you, she's only doing it for attention. Do you know I had to take the day off to come here today? I do have a job, you know, and not one person has even mentioned my promotion to floor supervisor. Nora, it's not an act, Bridget. I've always told her she wasn't strong enough to handle 4 kids, or to raise a boy for that matter. She's just too weak. Joe Olson, it's just one more time she's caused trouble. I'm not blaming her, mind you, but we need to focus on getting this family back to one piece and keeping Doug's job secure. Doug, listen, it's been hard enough around here without Jody going to pieces. Why, she hasn't cooked a decent meal in months, and just last week I had to iron my own shirts. And do you know I haven't been able to get Archer over here to play golf in I don't know how long. I know it's because he doesn't want to be around Jody and all her moping. You don't know how hard it is to get through the day without breaking down in tears over my son, and I just can't handle that and Jody breaking down too. Audra's presence at the bedroom door disrupted what Tony considered was the most inconsiderate bunch of caterwauling she had ever heard. The insensitivity of the entire family was building a pressure of pure anger in her chest. Her father was a brute, her mother a mouse, her sister Bridget totally self-absorbed. Nora was an anomaly, kind behind her back and completely unsympathetic to her face. And Doug was just completely narcissistic. No wonder Jody always seemed to be walking around in a haze. Interrupting Tony's thoughts, Audra looked into Tony's eyes and asked, "Is Mom going to be okay?" She handed Tony the sleeping pill. "I don't know," Tony said. The 2 women left the noise of the family outside the door as they walked farther into the bedroom and closed the door firmly. "It looks like your mom may not need another sleeping pill. One may be enough. Looks like she's asleep. I'm going to sit with her a while in case she wakes up. She usually doesn't sleep very long, and I'll be able to give her the pill anyway if she needs it." "I think that's a good idea, but let's hope one is enough." A couple of minutes of silence had gone by. Tony stated, "You know, I do think your dad should let her see a doctor." "I think so too, and I'll talk to him. I think he would just rather have her here at home is all." Jody mumbled in her sleep, "My girls, they want to take my girls." "No, honey, your girls are fine, and Audra is here to help." Opening her eyes slightly, Jody turned her head to look at her oldest daughter and said, "Audra, I'll be good. I'll take my medicine. Please don't leave." "Mom, I know you'll be good, but I'm only going to college. You remember, don't you? College." "You're going to college?" "Yes, and I need to make some money for expenses. I need to get a summer job." "A summer job? Oh, well, I think that's a fine idea. I'll help you find one." The words were dragged from her lips as once again her understanding of the situation slipped deeper under her emotional exhaustion. Her eyes started to droop leisurely, drawing down a curtain over the hollowness in their depths. "I think she's going to go back to sleep. Why don't we leave her alone?" Tony said. Leaning over her mother, Audra gave her a kiss on the cheek. Tony, standing on the other side of the bed, watched Audra linger over her mother's face, her hair falling to the side, exposing a green and blue bruise at the bottom of her neck. Holding her anger in check, Tony walked to the door of the room, willing Audra to follow. As Audra reached for the doorknob, Tony stopped her by leaning forward and quietly whispering into her hair, "I saw the bruise on your neck. Did Travis do that to you again?" Audra turned so abruptly, Tony jumped back so that their faces wouldn't collide. "A bruise?" "Yes, on your neck." "Oh, it must be an old one." "Audra, I know what bruises look like, and that one is not that old. I thought you had stopped seeing Travis," she whispered fiercely. "I did. I mean, I did for a while, but we kind of got back together a few weeks ago. I see. And he's still manhandling you? No, I mean, just that once about a week ago. But he didn't mean to do it. He'd gotten in trouble at work and was in a bad mood, and I was pushing him to go to a party. It was totally my fault. I should have just let him calm down a little before I asked. He just grabbed me a little harder than he meant to, that's all. Audra, that isn't all. I told you how abusers work. They always make it feel like it's your fault. I thought you were going to break it off with him. I did, but he was so sad and he kept calling and asking for another chance. It was just that one time, I swear. He promised he'd never do it again if I'd get back together with him. It's never just one time. There will always be another time and other reasons, and they'll always be your fault. Don't you understand? It's not like that. Maybe other guys are like that, but not him. He's changed. No, honey, he hasn't. He may be good to you now, but what about the next time he gets mad or blames you for something that went wrong? You don't know him. I tell you, he'll never do it again. He promised. Fine, I hope you're right. But please, if he ever does hurt you again, you will at least tell your mom, okay? Maybe her knowing someone needs her will help her mentally. No way. Why would Mom understand? She's barely holding it together as it is. Besides, she's never been with anybody but Daddy, and he's never raised a hand to her. She can't possibly do anything. But I'm telling you, it won't ever happen again. Okay, but remember, Audra, I did promise I'd turn him into the police if he ever physically... Very slowly, her words halted. The word physically dragged slowly from Tony's lips, making her halt her tirade mid-sentence. An answer to a question she'd never thought to ask flitted through her mind too fast for her to capture it. But it was there, again, lurking as she asked herself, what is it? What am I missing? Perplexed by Tony's sudden halt, Audra asked, Tony, are you okay? What? Oh, yes. Anyway, like I was saying, if he ever physically hurts you again, I will turn him in, and I mean it. He won't, I promise. Can we just drop it now? Yes, I'll drop it for now, but God only knows what can happen in an abusive relationship. It's up to you to decide when to save yourself, and if you don't do something about it, I'll have to intervene. Okay, I swear it won't happen again. I think I need to go see if a decision has been made about Mom, okay? Giving a sharp nod of firm authority, Tony let Audra walk out the door. Lingering behind to get control of her emotions, Tony had her back to the bed and didn't see the troubled expression crossing Jody's face as the words of their conversation seeped into her anguished dreams. After a few moments of calming herself down, Tony decided to leave the room so Jody could sleep when she heard a sudden intake of breath. Turning, she saw Jody's glazed eyes trying desperately to stay open and her hand lift in silent beckoning. Walking back to the bed, she took Jody's uplifted hand. In a voice stronger than she looked, Jody said, It's my fault, you know. It's all mine. What is, honey? Everything, came the determined whisper. Dougie J's death, Lexi, Audra, everything, even Dayla hating me. Tony squeezed Jody's hand with both of hers. That's not true. Lexi and Audra are fine. Don't worry about them. Dayla doesn't hate you, and no one is to blame for Dougie J. Why would you think that? A slice of silence fell inside the room. Tony could tell that fatigue was fighting for power over Jody's will to speak. Just as Tony thought Jody had fallen back asleep, she said, I know. It's my fault. Doug said so. I should have watched him closer. Doug blames me. Another bit of silence followed as she seemed to be gathering her thoughts. You know, they always said I wasn't strong enough to raise a son. I guess they were right. Tony's back stiffened from disbelief. It wasn't your fault, Jody. Do you hear me? It was an accident. Doug said what he said out of grief. Nothing more. In a semi-state of sleep and guilt, Jody murmured, No, it's my fault. Doug always said I was a pathetic mother. But God, why did it have to be Dougie J? My baby, she whimpered as tears rolled down her cheek. Tony watched as Jody's eyes closed again, her heart breaking for her friend. She stood over Jody, hoping the sleeping pill had finally taken full effect. But after only a small spell of silence, Jody once again broke through the strength of the drug with eyes staring dreamily into a world only she could see. "Can you find Tinkerbell for me? Tink will know what to do." Tamping down the worried panic building inside her chest, Tony simply answered, "Tinkerbell? Sure, honey, sure. I'll find Tinkerbell for you." "Can I ask you something, Tony?" "Of course, you can ask me anything." "I heard what you said to Audra. Will you please help her? Save her from Travis? Save her from herself?" The words were barely audible, but they took Tony aback. Trying to keep her emotions hidden, she replied to Jody's request. "I'll keep an eye on her, but it's you she needs. You're the only one I think who can get through to her. Jody, you just get better and you save her, okay?" Jody once again found the strength to look up and directly into Tony's eyes and said, "I don't think I can. I'm not physically strong enough. Like you said, only God knows." Her eyes fluttered closed once again. Tony stayed bent over her, staring at her face, distraught by what she'd seen in Jody's eyes before she fell asleep. Pain, extreme pain, and hopelessness. Suddenly, in the silence of the room while she watched Jody sleep, the answer she'd been looking for popped into her head like a bullet to her temple. The word had Tony tripping over her thoughts. "That's it. Oh my God, all these years of living next door and I never knew. Jody was never physically abused. Jody has been emotionally abused and probably verbally." She could see it all so clearly. The subtle put-downs and insults, the negative labels, the undermining of her confidence as a wife and mother. It was all there. First by her father, then by Doug, both demanding obedience. A mother who looked the other way, and two sisters with their own issues. One with the obsessive need to be the center of attention, and the other with her passive-aggressive personality. Mentally beating herself up, Tony sat down on the edge of the bed and berated herself for her own stupidity. How could I have missed it? All the years of knowing Jody and Doug, and I never recognized it. I've been trained to recognize the signs, and I didn't see it. Tony mused over the past years as she hung her head, thinking as memories flashed by like an old movie projector on high speed. All these years of thinking that joking at Jody's expense was just that, jokes. But to Jody, they weren't jokes. She had taken them seriously and hid the hurt behind gentle smiles and little chuckles to protect the illusion of a perfect life. Tony's thoughts mingled together in a chaotic mess as her relationship with the Warrens tangled with her advocate training. Distance yourself so you don't become personally involved. How do you distance yourself when the victim is so close? Watch for domestic violence. There will be physical signs. How can there be physical signs when the abuse is emotional? Victims will wear long sleeves and dark glasses to cover bruises. There are never any purple marks marring Jody's arms and legs. There was no need to wear sunglasses to hide black eyes. Tony sat and felt ashamed, feeling she had failed Jody and her work. Like a record stuck on a scratch, the question went around and around in her head. How do you recognize emotional abuse when there are no physical signs? How did I miss it? What did I miss? Turning her head, she stared at Jody and felt Jody once again staring at her. A glazed look of eerie non-recognition to her friend, and turned over and finally fell into a deep sleep. Unexpectedly, like the needle on that flawed record jumped over the groove, all of Tony's questions were answered with that one brief glance in Jody's haunted expression. It's in her eyes. There, behind Jody's eyes, was the emotional trauma of hurtful words, belittlement, insults, and non-support. In one quick moment, she had revealed the abuse she'd been living with her entire life, hidden behind a facade of normal. Deep in the silent well of Jody's eyes was the truth that Tony had failed to see. Jody's life of criticism and put-downs had branded her with a permanent mark of worthlessness. Tony then realized that there were physical signs after all. It was the bruises behind her eyes. These were Jody's scars. With renewed determination, Tony stood up and said aloud to herself, "I have to help her, and I know just who to call." Chapter 27, Beyond a Purple Sky. The decision had been made against some of the family's better judgment. The girls would visit friends and relatives over the summer, and Jody would stay home, supposedly to recover. But Jody knew it was to avoid any embarrassment to Doug. Doug had spoken, and his word was final. Jody didn't mind staying home anyway. It was the one place she felt close to Dougie J. The day the girls all left for their summer plans, Jody had had no say as she watched them leave. Deep in her heart, where instincts played catch with reason, she knew it wasn't permanent, but it made her feel empty nonetheless. To add to the emptiness, Doug found reasons to stay away from home longer and longer. Secretly, Jody was glad when Doug didn't come home right after work, but she knew it was wrong to feel that way, so she fought daily to push the guilt down and hide her inner betrayal. With no one home to hear him and act as a buffer, Doug's insults had grown more blatant and loudly vocal. You look like hell. Why don't you take some pride in yourself and clean yourself up? Or, this house is a mess. You can't even do that right anymore. You're the reason we don't have friends. No one wants to be around you. Or, your stupidity amazes me. No wonder the girls left. I don't want you calling them either. Just leave them alone and let them have some fun being away from you. I expect to have sex on schedule. Don't think this act of yours is fooling me for a minute. And I don't want you to just lay there like a dead fish anymore either. I'm a man and I have needs. Then the final blow. I'm sick to death of you moping around. If you want to walk around half dead, then go ahead. But don't expect me to be here to pick up the pieces. On days when Doug left early with the threat of staying late at work, she would stay in bed for hours, lying still and calm, letting the mattress consume her as the cotton batting engulfed her like a shroud. Surrounded by synthetic feathers, she would allow herself to sink ever deeper into the confining fabric of the sheets, unnerved by the thought of disappearing into its folds. For days at a time, nothing would change as sleep eluded her, and the routine of the minutes turned into the drone of the hours, which turned into the monotony of the days. As the days melted one into the other, her mind would glide effortlessly into the sweet peace of imaginary worlds. The only thought that kept her from being sucked under was getting her girls back. She would remind herself that she had to stay in the here and now as her inner self fought with her exterior existence until the day Doug told her the truth of the girls leaving. The girls aren't coming back, you know. This statement was said in such a matter-of-fact way it took Jody a while to comprehend what he said. What? She said. That's right. Audra is going straight to college as soon as summer is over. Lexi is thinking of staying with Mom and Dad next year so she can continue her treatment. But what? No one told me. What about Dayla? She's supposed to be home next week. Don't be stupid. I'm telling you now, aren't I? And Dayla, well, of course she'll be here for school, but I decided to let her continue to stay with the Fergusons for the rest of the summer. Your parents think it would be a good break for you, and I agree. You need to stay home and pull yourself together. But Doug, Jody, stop right there. The decisions have been made. By the way, I let Tony talk me into taking everyone on a vacation before school starts. That should be enough. Her children's absence caused an edginess in Jody that she filled with obsessive cleaning. She'd prove her worth to Doug, she vowed. While sleep eluded her, she scrubbed the grout in the kitchen tile on her hands and knees until her knees were bruised. The spots in the living room carpet by the front door grew into an imaginary dark smudge that wouldn't come out no matter how hard she washed them. She thought the walls were dusty, so she used a stepladder to dust them from top to bottom, at one point scraping the paint off because it would not come clean. There was no end to the emptiness and no end to the dirt she constantly saw about her. Fatigue finally made Jody give in to the filth. Besides, she reasoned, no one was around to care anyway. To fill her day, she began to count the hours until the beginning of the school year and the vacation Doug had promised that would bring her daughters back. 1:30 in the afternoon, only 10.5 hours left in the day to go, only 27 days needed to pass. And on she went until the fidgeting made her lose count. 3 weeks into her isolation, Jody stood and stared out the kitchen window into the bluish haze of a July fog, while condensation rolled down the window pane like tears. The house was warm, but she was cold down to her core. The loneliness seeping through her pores had her hugging herself against the ache. She felt chained, a prisoner shackled to bolts in a wall, unable to move very far, yet still seeing life go by and not being able to be a part of it. Unmoving, she stared out into the yard until the sun evaporated the sweat from the window and replaced it with rainbows as a summer storm galloped its way across the sky. Stepping to the back door, she opened it and let the rain pelt her face through the open mesh of the screen door. She could see the flowers in the yard bow their heads from the heavy drops as if seeking an audience with a queen, and the leaves on the trees fluttering as though they were applauding her appearance. Quietly, from far away, she could hear the wind calling her name. A low, soft whisper of moaning, long and hypnotizing. Remembering she had once again forgotten her pills, she convinced herself she'd take them later and ignored the nagging pressure to obey the doctor's orders. She just wanted to follow the sound of her name. She stepped out the door and into the rain, letting it anoint her head and baptize away the sins of her existence. She stood quietly until the rain finally abated and the wind no longer had to fight for superiority, drenched but clean. She stood in the middle of the yard, feeling the colors of the garden tingle across her skin, actually able to feel their brightness and vibrancy. It stimulated her senses and made her want to drape herself in its essence. The purple of the hydrangeas brought a vanity to her head. The velvet red of the roses made her chest swell. The blue of the pansies made the back of her neck tense. The yellow of the lilies calmed her, and the Gerber daisies, her favorite, made her want to fly. She wanted to lie down amongst the colors and find silence from the voices punishing her skull, while the shadows of the trees wrapped around her like a security blanket swaddling a baby. Reality was once again sliding smoothly from her grasp, and she relished the feeling. As the crisp, warm wind blew into her domain, dainty dandelion seeds floated across the grass and into the air, and she marveled at the effortless way they took flight. It dawned on her then that it wasn't the wind calling her name, but the fairies whose purpose in life was to protect her. It wasn't seeds crossing her view, but the glimmering of wings flying toward heaven. They were back. She watched in fascination as the seed-like fairies drifted by her, their fuzzy wings catching the light. With an urge she couldn't explain, she knew she had to protect them in return from the thorns of the bushes, knowing they were too light to fight where the wind took them. She could see them flapping against a blade of grass or leaf, trying to free themselves. Without realizing it, she walked faster and faster, trying to catch them as they played hide and seek with the shadows. When they fell to the ground, she crawled after them and gently cradled them in the palm of her hand. Picking them up, she would lift her open hands to the sky and wait for the wind to once again lift them to flight. Looking up, she saw the sky darkening into shades of purple and gray. The rain wasn't over. Her mood changed swiftly as she watched the white clouds struggle to stay pure. There were too many contradictions capturing her attention, and it began to give her a headache. The slight flight of the fairies moving faster and faster away from her, knowing the rain would drown them when it came. The urgency to follow them contradicting the need to stay within the confines of peace among the flowers. The heaviness of the shadows breaking up the fragility of the light. It all started disturbing her composure. She had to get away. She had to let the fairies lead her beyond that darkening purple sky. Jody watched the seeds float over the fence of her backyard toward the front, and she followed them, picking an orange daisy as she went. Turning the corner of her house, a flash of light blinded her eyes, making her squint. The cross on top of the church steeple a half-mile away caught a spark from the sun, making it gleam like a beacon, capturing her attention. Stopping in her pursuit, she stood fascinated by the gleaming symbol. The steeple, she hadn't noticed it in months. She knew immediately it was where the fairies were going, to the church where Dougie J was. She blessed them silently under her breath and started walking. 2 blocks from her house, she stopped and glanced back, unsure if leaving was right. As the sun filtered through the lingering fog, it bounced off the white aluminum siding of the house and darkened the windows, reminding her of black eyes staring from a too white face. The skylight above the door gave the face a broad nose, and the door itself was a wide mouth leading to the throat of a beast that devoured souls. She turned and kept walking and never looked back, certain what she was doing was right. Keeping the cross in sight, Jody walked around houses, avoiding cars crossing streets. If the whiteness of the sky melded the steeple into a two-dimensional impression of reality, she would stop and contemplate it, confused, and with her head tilted like a child trying to understand adult terminology. she'd panic and start walking faster until it made sense again. Tony looked down at a sleeping Jody lying on top of the soft mound of dirt of Dougie J's grave. Her face was covered with a large daisy. She had followed Jody to the cemetery. Luckily, Tony had decided to work from home that day and had seen her at her kitchen window, drinking coffee and watching the sun fall when she saw Jody step outside into her own backyard. She'd been watching Jody for 3 weeks, ever since her girls had left. Now, Tony stood and watched Jody stand in the rain and chase something around her yard. She wanted so badly to rush over and pull her back into the house and out of the rain, but Tony had been careful over the last few weeks not to do anything that might appear as if she were disobeying Doug's orders. She knew that Jody's fear of any kind of disobedience from anyone would be perceived as disloyal and would scare Jody back into her isolated hell. Doug had told Tony in no uncertain terms that he didn't appreciate her interference, so she had watched over Jody in secret. Every chance she got, Tony would look out the windows into the Warrens' backyard, hoping she wouldn't see Jody lying in the dirt again, talking to invisible woodland creatures. After the incident in the river, Doug had taken a board and nailed it across the back gate so Jody couldn't get out of the backyard. Tony was grateful he at least had done that. When Tony saw Jody start down the street, she slipped out of her house and followed safely behind her, worried about her friend's safety. It was several blocks before it dawned on her where she was headed. She watched Jody enter the cemetery gates and head directly to the row where she knew Dougie J lay. Standing outside the fence, Tony watched Jody stare down at the little grave for half an hour. After a while, Jody had laid down on top of the tiny mound and fell asleep. The tears in Tony's eyes blurred her vision, and she waited until she was calm enough to go to her friend and give her the aid she needed. Tony bent down and touched Jody's shoulder. "Jody, you need to wake up now." Jody opened her eyes and let herself be rolled over. "Oh, hi," was all she said. "Hi." Jody sat up and took in her surroundings. "Gosh, however did you find me?" She picked the flower off her chest where it had fallen. "I was hiding behind this daisy. You're very good at finding fairies." Tony kept her expression neutral, getting used to Jody's meandering mind. "I saw the flower moving and knew it had to be you." "Oh, well, I'd better be more careful, huh? You can never tell when there are dangers about. I could have been eaten by a bird or something." "Yeah, you're going to have to be more careful. You know, being this far from home, you could have gotten lost." "No worries about that. I could have just flown back with my friends." "But what about the wind or rain? What if they'd been too strong for you to fly?" Worry was beginning to cause Tony's chest to tighten. Jody's separation from reality usually didn't last this long. "Oh, well then I'd just go underground and follow the elves." The mention of elves was new. Tony turned her eyes away so Jody couldn't see the fear in them. "Well, let me help you this one time, okay?" she said. "Okay, I guess that'll be all right. You know, elves live in tunnels. They're tiny so they fit. It's how they get around." "No, I didn't know that." "Sometimes I wish I was an elf because when the flowers all die, there is no better place to be than underground." With her arm around Jody's shoulder, Tony halted in her steps at the statement. After a few moments of musing, she said, "You know, I think you're right. There is no better place than underground." Okay, end of that one. 2 more chapters and the epilogue. And we're done. I hope you're liking it. I'm so sorry I keep flubbing up. See you later.